All right, we're going to embark on the quest of the differential. This one just came from the wrecking yard. It's hasn't been apart, so I made sure I got a pan underneath here, and we're going to start at the bottom and zip these bolts out. And we start at the bottom so that when it starts leaking, it doesn't leak all over our bolts that we haven't taken out yet in our tools. This tag is very important. It helps us identify things and exactly what differential it is. They're often hard to read. You can sand it off a little bit or wire wheel it a little bit, but be careful because sometimes you can wire wheel the numbers right off of it. This one's actually pretty clear. And I always leave a couple at the top loose. And of course they both feel cross-threaded a little bit. That way when I break it loose, ooh, that's some nasty fluid. But that way when I break it loose, I can let it drain without getting the cover all in my way in. Now we can finish taking it off. And we're in. Okay, now that we've got it open, one of the first things that we're going to want to do is we are going to want to measure the backlash. Okay, I went ahead and set this up for backlash. You can see I've got it hooked onto the case here, and then I've got it sitting right on the ring gear tooth. And then you just move the ring gear, and you have to do it without moving the pinion, and it works best if you've got a lab partner or something that you can lock it down. But you can see that's moving about from -1 to about 7, 6, so it's moving about 7 thousandths. And so we'll write that down as our measurement. Then we'll loosen this up and we'll readjust over here. Let me readjust so that y'all can see. And now with that there, I can measure my ring gear run out. Go ahead and zero it. And then I'll turn the pinion. She looks like she's going from about -2 to positive. There was a high spot. Didn't get it that time. There it goes. There it is. About +4. So it's got about 6 thousandths of ring gear run out. So there's those two measurements. Now the next step is not a measurement, so we'll get this off and out of our way. Okay, now that we've got our measurements made, we're going to remove the differential pinion pin, and you just loosen this bolt here. Shouldn't be very tight. We take this bolt out. You see it won't come all the way out, and that's fine because we don't need it to. All we need to do is remove this pin. Okay, we don't even have to take it all the way out. And if we, let's see if I can zoom in here. I push the axle in, and the C-clip should just kind of fall off there. This one's might have a little, some of them have a little O-ring kind of part in them so that they stick to the shaft a little bit. Okay, this one's going to need a little more persuasion than that. Really not the right type of pliers, but I don't want to go get any. So that goes out, and then the axle comes right out. Other side, push that in. Push the C-clip off. And then pull the axle out. And then put this differential pinion pin right back in. And put the bolt back in. It doesn't need to be tight, but that way your spider gears don't fall out. And then from there we can pull the axles out. The ends of the axle tube. Okay, now that the axles are out, it's time to mark and remove the carrier caps. So we can see that they have, at least I hope you can see that really close. You can see they have an arrow, right? It's cast right into the cap that is, they point to the outsides. So you have to make note of that. But we need to make sure that we mark left and right, and in case we forget, and 3 days from now when we get parts and we start putting this back together, we go, oh, did those arrows point out or in? We should always mark our caps. So the easiest way that I found to mark a cap is to make a punch mark. That didn't work out, mostly. Okay, and then I'll make a punch mark right here. So now I know that this cap doesn't go down here, because if you turn this around, this is going to be on the inside, and there's one mark. Then on the other side, I will put 2 marks. And you have to make them big enough that they don't get obliterated when you clean everything up. That's kind of 2 marks, and then 2 marks again on the case. Hopefully without hitting my camera. So now you can see we have 2 marks here and 2 marks here. That way we know exactly where each cap goes. So then it's as simple as pull the bolts. And coming out, you can use an impact or whatever tools you want. That's not a big deal. I always set the parts all right on the bench, and I put them in order so that I keep everything exactly the way it's aligned in the housing. Okay, now we're ready to pull it out, and I gotta grab a wrench and I'll show you a really neat trick. Okay, this carrier is held in by two tapered roller bearings, and as we know with tapered roller bearings, they need just a little bit of preload on them. And the way these are loaded is with shims. But what that does is that makes this tight in here, and so it can be difficult to get this to pull out. But if you put a wrench, come on, right there, and then come around to the other side and just roll the pinion, the angle of the bearing pushes the carrier right out of the housing, at least until the gears no longer mesh. Now, even though the gears are no longer meshing, you can see we now have it up high enough that we can get something in there to pry, and we can finish removing it from the housing. In this case, it looks like I can just get this spacer, and once you get one spacer out, then there's no more side pressure. Now, take note, there's a chamfered edge here, and this edge is flat, and we want the flat edge toward the bearing. So make sure it aligns that way when you put everything down on your bench, so that you get it all back together the right direction. Okay, now this carrier just lifts out, and we'll lose that raise. We now have the two bearings out, and we have the races out, and I'm going to remove this. Take note, if there are any shims, they will be on one side or the other of this, or it's possible that they're behind the bearings. But you need to know where everything goes so that when it goes back together, it goes in the right order. Okay, and there's that little rascal that fell away when I took the axle out, and I couldn't find it. Okay, so with that done, we can take our carrier apart. So let me lay out a little clean surface here and reorient my camera. Not quite that far. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to take the spiders out. So the bolt comes out, pin comes out, just like that. And it's just as easy as rolling one spider. The top one will lay there, the bottom one will roll into your hand. And make sure that they stay. I have the bolt here, so I know this one goes on the side with the bolt. And then the side gears come out, just like that. And we have a carrier. These aren't actually shims. Well, they are kind of a shim, but this is not a spacer shim. These are the actual, it's a bushing that acts as a bearing surface. So make sure you have all four. There's one on each gear. And notice this one was stuck inside the carrier, and we have the other three. So now we can inspect these surfaces. You have to clean them up so you can see them good. We can inspect the spider gears for any wear and make sure it's all clean and nice and shiny and ready to go back together. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the measurements here that you're going to do before you take this apart, But I did want to show you using a dial or a beam type torque wrench. Let me bring this around this way. Hopefully you guys can see this. But nope, you can't. Reposition. Okay, so you can see it's at 0, and when I move it, it will move the black arrow, and then we can reset it so that we can see how high it goes. But that's not the reading you're looking for. What you're looking for is, as we're going, what's it reading as you're moving. And as you can see, both directions, it's only a few inch-pounds. It's definitely not enough, maybe 5 to 10 inch-pounds. So this is really loose by all accounts. But some of the other measurements that you're going to make on here, you're going to measure the pinion bearing in play, and that's going to be here, moving this in and out. It should technically be 0, so hopefully you don't have any. And you're going to measure the pinion depth, which is going to be from here or here to this. You're going to use a depth micrometer. It has to be within 1/1000th of an inch. So you can't, ballpark it and get something that measures within 10,000ths of an inch, or have something that's set up here that moves a little bit, because that won't work. Anyway, and so drive pinion turning torque, pinion bearing in play, and then pinion depth are the 3 measurements you're going to make on this before you take it apart. So let me move back around here, and we will do the next procedure, which is going to be to remove the pinion nut, washer, and flange. Move around here. Set this up a little farther back. And I'm just going to use an impact to take this off. Ouch. I'm going to use a pry bar to hold it. If you don't want to use, other than the pry bar, you can also use the wizard staff. The wizard staff is amazing, but it's necessary for putting it back on, but not so much for taking it off. Taking it off, you can just use, oops, there we go. Taking it off, we can just use a pry bar. We just have to hold it. And it's really tight, apparently. So do be careful, because obviously it's really tight, and as it moves, I'm trying to hold this bar in here, but as it rocks around, it can break your finger pretty easily. Okay, there, we got that out. If we're just doing a pinion bearing, you can just do this without taking all the internals apart. But if you do that, I'm going to have to go get a puller, because that one doesn't want to come out. But if you're doing this and you're not setting the differential back up, you absolutely need to mark all 3 pieces. You need to mark where the nut is. Come on, start the thread. There it goes. We mark where the thread is in relation to the shaft. That gives us an idea where to put it back when we torque it. And then we mark the shaft in relation to the flange. That way we know that we didn't move the flange a spot to the left, and now our other marks are off. So let me go get a puller and we'll get that set up. Let go. Okay, close enough.
That came off okay.
Now we can, yeah, it did. It's amazing when a puller actually works the way it's supposed to. Now let's see what happens when we take the nut off. Can we get it the rest of the way off? Just like it's supposed to. Now, sometimes there's a washer here. This doesn't look like it has one because the washer is kind of built into the nut. So that's great. We have to look here for shims because they might shim in so many different places. Everything you take apart, you basically have to check for shims. Okay. I forgot to turn the video back on, but I just used a chisel and I worked my way around this seal until it's about ready to come out. And there it is. So once the seal is out, then we can grab these other pieces here. Shim. And that is the bearing. See if we can get it real easy with a hammer. And I'm going with no. Okay. It's really easy to screw up the end of the pinion, drive pinion shaft. So I put the nut back on, so I'm hitting the nut. Hopefully I didn't mess it up too bad. It still turns, so that's good. But I got it started going out, and so now it should just come right out. Stupid thing. Okay, up. Okay, sit, Ubu, sit. Okay, got her out. Let's take the nut off. Outer bearing. And then around back. Here's our drive pinion with the inner bearing. And so now we're all apart. Okay, now that we're all apart, now we can clean, inspect. Most of the time when you take these apart, you're doing one of two things. You're either changing the bearings. Actually, if I'm taking one apart, I'm always changing the bearings. The pinion bearing races, I don't know if you can see that. Let me get some light. Have cutouts, so you can just punch them out. You punch the front one out to the front, and you punch the rear one out to the rear. from the front. The inner pinion bearing has to be pressed off the shaft. You will destroy it, so you can't ever take one off without destroying it and replacing it. Side bearings, sometimes you can get them off. Most of the time you can't get them off without destroying them, so you're replacing them. You can see they do have little cutouts here, so you can use a punch, but it's hard to get a punch in there, and it's hard to get a punch through to the other side because the ring gear's in the way. But the only other thing you're usually going to do here is you're going to replace the ring and pinion, and if you do that, you have to set them up. Okay. You can see it's got numbers stamped on the end, and we use that. It's this 5 here. We use that. If the new one's stamped 5, you're probably going to use the same shims, but if it's not, you're going to have to adjust. And always replace the ring gear bolts if you take them out. I can't think of anything else. So once you get the new bearings on, if you're replacing the ring and pinion, get that all set up, then we're ready to go back together.